Morning world, it's Saturday the 10th of November 2018. I'm still in Singapore, I'm loving every minute of it. I'll be back to the UK in about 3 days' time. I'm going to do a bit on Mercury retrograde now, but before I do that, seeing as it's so popular, I thought I'd catch up a little bit on some more of the mythology from the last few days. A big thank you to Virginia for accurately pointing out that I got it wrong yesterday. Pallas Athene was not one of Kronos' daughters. Kronos' daughters whom he swallowed were Hera, stroke Juno, Hestia, stroke Vesta, and Demeter, stroke Ceres. Thank you for that. Now, go back before that, there's a thing called the Titanomachy. According to Greek mythology, now mythology, you've got Greek mythology, Roman mythology, before that you've got Cretan, Minoan mythology, Egyptian mythology, and before that you've got the mythology from Babylon and and Chaldea, and even before that, the very earliest civilization that modern historians will acknowledge from Assyria, and before that Sumeria. It all derives from there, and of course any mythology is only as good as the authors who wrote it in the first place, based on their cultural conditioning and their time of history. So, you know, we have to take it all with a pinch of salt. But modern Western astrology takes 99% of its mythology from the Greek. In the original Greek mythology, the original pairing, if you like, was Uranus, the sky god, and Gaia, the earth goddess, and they gave birth to 12 beings called the Titans, of whom Kronos was the most human-like, Kronos stroke Saturn. When there was a war between the Olympians, freed from Kronos' belly by Zeus, and the Titans, various other entities took the side of both the Titans and the Olympians. The Olympians were joined by the Hecatoncheires, the 100-handed monsters. Other beings took the side of the Titans. One of them was Atlas, from where we get the word Atlantic, Atlantis. Atlas was the father of I think it's a dryad called Maya, whom mated with Zeus, stroke Jupiter, and gave birth to Hermes. Hermes stroke Mercury in the Roman. From Mercury we get the word mercantile, merchant, even mercenary. And Mercury is always known as the planet of commerce, of communication, of trade, of business deals. Mercury is also seen as a little bit of a trickster, coyote in Native American Western medicine. You can never quite trust Mercury. The attributes of Mercury astrologically are that of networking, communication. It is the way you read, write, think, speak, and move. It is the communication you have with yourself mentally. It is the communication you have with others through verbal communication, text, email, telephone. And it is the communication you have with the larger world through partying, socializing, interacting, traveling, of course. And now we're heading into a Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius. The whole meaning of Mercury retrograde is being revolutionized in the last 10 or 20 years. You know, you look at the astrological textbooks of 30, 40 years ago, and they say, yes, when Mercury is retrograde, cars break down, phone calls get missed, there's transport problems, and there's communication issues. And these were and are the principles of today's meaning of Mercury retrograde. Of course, in the modern technological world that we live in, Mercury retrograde now means something very different. Mercury retrograde is when the emails get lost, the Skype calls get confused, there's a Skype crash or a FaceTime crash, and it's when technology breaks down, appointments get missed, emails get lost, phone calls get missed, travel plans screw up. Whenever you're travelling on a Mercury retrograde, always allow yourself some wriggle room, allow an extra day to cover for the fact that things might screw up. Mercury retrograde has been known a long time, but it's not been really recognised in astrology until comparatively recent times as the force that it is now taken as being. And by comparatively recently, I mean just within the last 100 years or so. There's a lot of new work being done on that, and one of my best friends is actually doing her dissertation for her master's degree on Mercury retrograde, and it'd be a privilege to present that at some stage in the future. I will, once I get her permission. Mercury's coming up to be retrograde in Sagittarius, a sign that Mercury doesn't really like being in, because Sagittarius is all about the overview and the big picture, whereas Mercury deals with the details and the analysis. Of course, Mercury rules Gemini, the opposite sign of Sagittarius. So Mercury is not that comfortable in Sagittarius. It keeps getting caught up in the overview, the big picture, the larger than life stuff, the philosophy, the abstract and the concept, rather than the fine-tuning, the detail and the analysis, which is where it's most comfortable. So Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius suggests that collectively, over the coming 5-6 weeks, we're all going to sort of somehow get the big picture ever so slightly wrong. There's going to be a misunderstanding of the ideal, of the philosophy, of the big picture behind the scenes, and there is a strong capacity for screwing up here. Collectively also, as Mercury stands still in Sagittarius and goes retrograde, it will be squaring Neptune. Now, I've already commented in a couple of videos that this is going to lead to a set of confusion and uncertainty as to outcomes, and there will be people deliberately muddying the water. I noticed just in the last few hours that there's already a lot of accusation around voter fraud, whether it's substantiated or not, in the recent American elections. This is expected. And this energy of obscuring, of fog and cloud, of mist, treacle and quicksand, of nebulous communications, and of a lack of transparency and clarity, let alone honesty, is unfortunately going to be around for at least the next couple of weeks, because as Mercury stands still, and it actually goes retrograde, I think it's 17 minutes past 1 in the morning UK time on Saturday the 17th of November, so that's in just fractionally over 1 week from now. But over this coming week, Mercury is now somewhere around 10-11 degrees of Sagittarius. It's going to stand still at 13 degrees of Sagittarius, and it's going to be between 11 and 13 degrees of Sagittarius for the next 12, 13, 14 days. Of course, Neptune is now standing still at 13/14 degrees of Pisces, so we are in this 2-week-long period of Mercury square Neptune. When I see that in a client's chart, I often talk to them about how their best communication is not done through logic and rationality and analysis. It is done through words like metaphor, analogy, and the best communication is often accompanied by things like facial characteristic and body language. And with a Mercury square Neptune, there is no hope of understanding. The logic is simply not there. So for people who want to communicate important things over the coming couple of weeks, don't try and explain, don't try and communicate in terms of clear understanding, because it just won't work. Instead, use metaphor and analogy and body language and facial characteristic so that people know what you mean. It is about meaning, not understanding. And if you can get meaning across instead of understanding, meaning is a much deeper word. It's much more important, and people get the whole concept of thing. Understanding is a purely logical construct. And now we're coming into this Mercury retrograde. It's important to get meaning across. It's a much deeper philosophy. Now this Mercury retrograde will last from, I think it's the 17th of November through to about the 6th of December. And even then, when Mercury stands still at the end of Scorpio and starts moving forward, re-entering Sagittarius in the second week of December, it will then not clear its retrograde shadow until just around the solstice, just after the solstice. So it does seem that from now, for the next 6 weeks, we're not going to get the degree of clarity and transparency that we need to be able to act as effectively and efficiently as possible. So I suggest that for many people, not everyone, because this Mercury retrograde will affect perhaps, let's have a think, it's going to affect maybe 15-20% of us, but that's a substantial proportion. I suggest that this is the best thing we can do over the next 6 weeks is dance with it. You're not going to get the clarity you need. So don't rely on your mind, the logical, rational, analytical mind. Instead, rely on your intuition and your instinct. And just for the semantics, the difference between intuition and instinct is that intuition is a human construct that comes from a blend of one's soul, one's mind, and to a lesser extent one's heart. It's a human instinct construct, whereas instinct is much more of an animal construct. We've spent collectively so long trying to be human, we forgot that we live in an animal body, and that the body has a form of instinct, a gut instinct, if you like, that is at least as reliable as the intuition, if not more so. So perhaps it's fair to say that over the next 4 to 6 weeks, and especially in the next couple of weeks with Mercury square Neptune, it's as important to trust one's gut instinct as anything else. This will sort out much of the confusion. Basically, folks, don't believe everything you're told. Mercury's retrograde in Sagittarius square Neptune, and I can't think of really that much more of a more difficult position for Mercury. So dance with it, trust your gut instinct, and sometimes you have to just close your eyes, open your mouth, and trust that the right words will come out. As you can see, my mate here, he's looking after me, he's my friend, he's keeping me in tune. Big thank you to all those people in Singapore. I'll be back in the UK in about a few days' time. Until then, happy trails, folks. Bye.